today we're going to talk about science in the kitchen. We thought we should start by asking how many of you help in the kitchen at home and how do you help? So, can you raise your hands if you help? You can also
Yes,
type in the
yes.
chat window.
Lots of people raising their hand. Okay, Anushka says everything. That's an easy way of getting
Wow.
away. Abhay says cooking. Okay, Ahana says omelets, cooking, vegetables, omelets. Okay, cooking.
Okay, Shlok says washing, peeling potatoes, nice.
Nice, yeah. Oh,
Ooh,
baking
muffins,
muffins. Nice.
nice.
Oh, so lots of helpers, Nehal. We have
Yes,
lots of helpers. This is absolutely wonderful. That's great, guys. Okay, so we do lots of things in the kitchen, right, Snail? Yes.
yes, definitely.
So when you work in the kitchen, guys, you have to think of yourself as a scientist in a laboratory, and that laboratory is your kitchen. Because there's many similarities with working in a lab and working in a kitchen. For example, you need heat. So do you have a stove in your kitchen?
Definitely.
Many people say yes, they do. You need to plan things. Have you ever had a situation where your mom gets up in the morning and says, "अरे चना तो डालना ही भूल गए. I forgot to soak it. तो आज का menu में क्या है?" Everyone agrees. Very familiar in my house. So we need to plan things like we put bacteria in cultures. We soak chana overnight. You need tools. You need scissors sometimes in the kitchen. You need a knife. You need different kinds of knives. Likewise, we need tools to work in the lab. And finally, you need the right equipment, right? You can't possibly make the best biryani ever in a flat vessel. You need a cooker, right? Likewise, in the lab also we need the right equipment to increase temperature, to cool something, to rotate something, whatever it may be. Okay, so you all agree that now you're going to start looking at helping in the kitchen as you're a scientist figuring out their laboratory. Okay, all right, all right. So we'll move on.
Okay, so one of the most common things that all of you must have seen in your kitchen is boiling of milk, right? Yes, how many of you have seen this happen in the kitchen?
Oh, yes.
Everybody is
Yes.
saying yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay, right? And what is the most common phenomena that happens when you boil milk? What's the one thing that does once in a while go wrong?
Ah, it boils over, right?
Yes,
Okay, please
exactly.
don't use the chat window to type other things other than content related to the session. Okay, I'll have to ask you to leave the session in that case. Okay, great. So you notice it
Yes,
overflows.
exactly, right. So, but then when we boil milk, what are we doing? We're basically giving it some heat, right? We're increasing the temperature of the milk. And what do you think that does? Why do you think it's important to increase the temperature of the milk?
Very good, Ala. We kill
It's kill
bacteria.
bacteria, exactly. So what you see on this graph here is what happens at different temperatures when we give it heat. So look at the first column. The first column is untreated milk, which means that it's not been given any heat, it's not been boiled. And do you see how high the bacterial counts are? So that's the y-axis. Do all of you know how to read a graph? On the y-axis is the bacterial counts, which means that they are higher in the untreated milk. Now, what happens when you give it heat treatment? What is happening to those graphs? What is happening to the bar graph? What happens at 80 degrees or 90 degrees or 100 degrees Celsius? What is your observation?
What happens? What's happening in the graph?
What happens to
Anyone?
the bacterial counts? Does it increase or decrease?
Any guesses, guys? We're killing bacteria, but what you can type it in the chat window. Type it. What is happening when you give 80, 90, 100 degrees Celsius heat? Let's go. Ala, Nirali, uh, Sharanya. Any guesses? Any guesstimate? So do you notice that the number of Snail, you can go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes,
You can
yes.
explain this. Yeah.
So the number of bacteria, which you see, they start going down, right? You see, initially they were around 10. The bacterial count was around where the number 10 is, but it's gone down to 4 the moment you give it 80 degrees Celsius temperature. And then as you increase, it goes down a little more. So what is this doing to the bacteria? What does it mean when the bacterial counts are low? It means that they're dying, right?
Absolutely. Yes. So what happens when you please type in the chat window, Sharanya? Please type in the chat window. All of you. Yeah. So it basically means is when you're heating the milk, you're killing the bacteria, right? In the process, you're killing the bacteria. Okay. So that's that's interesting. That's why we heat our milk every morning, right? You've all seen
Yes.
those milk packets come. Yeah, everyone sees those milk packets. Why can't people type in the chat
Pooja,
window, Snail?
are you? Yeah, I
Can
think there is some issue with the chat window. Is everybody able to type?
okay, okay, sorry, maybe there's an issue. Okay, now try, please. Can you try? Okay, okay, great. There was some issue going on. Sorry about that. Okay, so everyone has seen milk packets. Okay, but Snail, what is it about the content of milk that is
Yes.
interesting? You know?
So what do you think milk is made of, guys? Does anybody know what milk is made of?
Let's see. Milk is made of milk,
Lactose.
fat,
It definitely has lactose, it has calcium, it has fats. Exactly, right? So all of these are fats, proteins, but a large chunk of milk is actually water.
and this says almost 87.3%, 88%.
Exactly.
That's huge. That's huge, and that's
But there's so
important.
much difference between milk and water, right? It's not the same thing.
Yeah, 88% water, Nirali. Isn't that amazing? Okay, but why is that
Okay,
important to know?
Anirudh has a question. Anirudh asks, how do the bacteria get into the milk? That's a
Okay,
good question. So where do you think, so firstly, where does our milk come from? Where do these packets come from? Cows, definitely. So cows are present in nature. We've talked multiple times about how there are bacteria everywhere, right? They're on our bodies, inside our bodies. The same way there are bacteria inside cows as well. So they could actually just come from the cows. But what happens to the milk? When you get the milk from the cows, does it immediately go into a plastic packet and come to your home? No, right? It there's a industry, there's an entire dairy industry that does all processing, packaging, so many things. So it could be that sometimes the bacteria come there, or it could be that the bacteria just came while it was being transported to your house. So there are tons of sources of bacteria. And some bacteria, as we know, are good, but some are bad. So we don't want to be ingesting bacteria that are bad because that's going to affect your health, right?
yes, absolutely. And look, pasteurization, Louis
Yes.
Pasteur. Look at all that. We have all our budding microbiologists right here. So it's white, Dhruti, because of the fat and the protein in milk. Exactly. Okay. So what often happens, Snehal, in my house is we start boiling milk and then we get caught up with other things in life. Has this happened to you guys? Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. And then you
So
heard that
many times.
and that push becomes like, oh, we need to do something about this. Okay. So, like Sneha said, 88% of milk is water. So, what happens on the gas that causes that push and everyone running to the stove to switch it off, right? Before it's too late. When your milk is boiling, your stove is providing the heat. Would you notice after some time there is like a layer that forms on that milk? And in different houses, it's called malai or jhag or cream, right? Do you notice that layer? So basically, the fat and the protein, which is only the 10 to 12% of the milk, has risen on top and formed the layer. So what is left? If the fat and the protein are on the top, what is left at the bottom of the stove top? What is the other 88 component, 88% of milk? Water. So that water is constantly boiling with that 100 degrees heat that you're providing it, because you know that 100 degrees is the boiling point of
Right.
water, right? At some point, so much water gets converted into water vapor. You know the gaseous state of water is water vapor. It gets converted to water vapor, which is like now, okay, it's staying stuck because of this thick fat and protein layer. At some point, there's so much steam built up that it bursts that layer. And that's when you see your push and everyone's running to the stove. It escapes. Very good. That it escapes. So now you understand and you can explain to your mom that, hey, I think that layer is forming on the top. Dad or mom, we need to be near the gas now. Now is the time. There's a lot of steam that's going to collect. So are these practical tips for you all to show off your science in the kitchen? Sounds good? Yes? Okay. So you can show this off tomorrow morning itself. The moment you see that layer, you need to go stand there because the steam is going to burst at some point. Did everyone get this? Was this a nice little anecdote? So you get up in the morning and your day starts with science the moment you boil milk, right? Okay, great. All right, let's go to the next one. Now you've had your
Okay.
milk, you need
Yes.
breakfast.
Yes. And so, okay, so how many of you have had eggs for breakfast? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so how do you cook eggs? How does
Uh,
everybody like their eggs?
not use slow. Okay. I
Omelets,
like omelets, boiled eggs.
boiled eggs.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, boiled is good. Omelets are good. Fried egg is good
Fried egg.
too.
Yes. Sunny side up. Okay, all right. So we have lots of different ways that eggs are cooked, right? But what happens when you actually cook an egg? So what do you think eggs are rich in? Eggs are rich in a protein called albumin, all right? Now that is present in the raw egg. But in the raw egg, it's in a very folded, the protein is in like a folded, a curled up state, okay, which is what you see on the screen there. But once you start heating it, what happens is the proteins undergo a process called denaturation, which basically just means that they open up from their folded, coiled up state, they open up. And once they open up, they have all these chemicals inside them. The protein is basically just different chemical molecules that are present. And they start forming bonds with each other. And when they form bonds with each other, these bonds basically lead to like a mesh or a cross linking matrix that is formed. And this matrix is actually your egg being cooked. So when you heat it, it changes the structure and the linking of these proteins. And because these proteins start forming this thick mesh, they basically cause the removal of water. So any water that is present in the egg starts evaporating off because of the heat.
Wow.
And because of that, albumin then basically just becomes insoluble and starts clogging up into this like white and yellow egg parts that you see that actually are cooking now. And the more temperature that you have, the higher the heat and the longer you cook it, the stronger these new bonds between the proteins are going to be. Okay, so what do you think? So now you know that heating the egg and cooking it leads to these bonds that are formed and the removal of water. So what do you think happens when you overcook an egg? So overcook means you've put it on heat for a really long time, and the heat is also
Oh,
very
yes.
high.
Yes. Hard. Sure.
Yes, because it's going to form really strong bonds. So it's going to become like rubbery,
It tastes
right?
bad too. I agree. I agree.
Yes,
It tastes pathetic. Yeah.
and it's going to dry up because eventually you're just evaporating off all the water that's present in it. So your egg's going to taste very dry. So which is why there is actually a lot of science between what is the perfect time to cook an egg, what is the amount of time you need to cook an egg. And ideally, if you like if you don't like your boiled eggs to be runny and you need that yellow part to be cooked completely, you should cook it only for 12 minutes.
Oh, okay. 12 minutes is the
If you,
golden number.
yes, and if you cook it more than that, you see this green ring kind of thing that forms on it, that's a sign that the egg is overcooked.
Okay. So Snail Nirali has a question. What is the plastic structure in the shell of a boiled egg? What plastic structure? Uh, not sure what you mean, Nirali. Not sure what you mean. But guys, in the meantime, while Nirali and Sharanya type their questions, I have to tell you a funny thing. Once I put eggs on to boil and I went into the room and I was listening to music and chilling and I just forgot the eggs were on boil. Thankfully, nothing happened with regards to the heat. But when I came out after 2 hours, the saucepan was totally charred and the eggs were like rock. They had become so hard and lost so much water. Like I had egg rocks. And thankfully nothing happened to anybody because of the heat. So don't do what I'm doing. Just understand that even scientists are human. Okay, so that layer is probably the layer, or I don't know. part of the egg. I'm not sure what that part is really. Some membrane which would
Yeah.
have formed when the egg is formed in the chicken. Okay, yeah. So yes, Abhishmat, you can maybe tell us something funny at the end, but you can type it here now if you want.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So that was ande ka funda.
Yes.
All right. Sounds good. Okay. Now, so the day is going on. You've had your milk and your egg, and now your mom says, "Okay, the cook is going to come in the evening, so I'll soak some chana." So at least 8 hours will be there till she can make some chana dish. So type everybody, what's your favorite chana dish? Chana fermentation.
Chole
We'll talk
bhature.
about that, Ala. Chana chapati, chana chaat, rajma. We soak that. Chole bhature.
Chole.
Ooh,
Yes.
don't even get me
That's
started.
my favorite.
Yes. And chana masala, that papdi chaat. We do so many things with
Yeah.
chana, right? Chole bhature. Everybody says chole bhature. Okay, so you see your mom. She takes some chana and puts it in a bowl and she soaks it. Is this familiar? In a bowl of water. Okay, so chana obviously comes from a plant. You open the pod of the plant and you have these little chana beans. It's also called chickpea, also called garbanzo beans. And you notice that the seed of the chana is actually a pretty tough structure. So it's made of two important molecules. One is amylose, which is a sugar, and the other is amylopectin. Now these both of these are important because we are doing something to this when we soak it. So is this clear with everybody? Everyone has seen a chana? Everyone has seen a chana. Everyone has seen a chana being soaked? Yes. And everyone knows two words, amylose and amylopectin. Okay. Now we are going to see what 8 hours of water treatment does to amylose and amylopectin. Okay, let's move on. Now, Snehal, I'll continue this part. You can do the next one. Sounds good? Okay. So when you are soaking it for 8 hours, your chana is packed with amylose and amylopectin, and you keep soaking it. What do you notice happens after 8 hours? What molecule is changing? Is it the amylose or the amylopectin? What molecule is changing in 8 hours of soaking from this chana to this chana? They swell up. Yes, if you notice, the amylose is becoming loose. It is stretching out. In the unsoaked chana, it's tight. The moment you put it in contact with water, it stretches out. Then your mom, after 8 hours, tells the cook, or she says, "Cooker mein dalo usko thode time ke liye." Is this very familiar in Indian households? To make chana bhatura or masala chana or papdi chaat or whatever those wonderful things are, which now my mouth is salivating. So when you put it in the cooker, the heat causes all these amylose molecules to escape. So this is what happens under the pressure cooker. All these amylose molecules escape. So what is the chana that you eat ultimately left with? What molecule are you eating actually? What molecule are you eating? Amylopectin. What you're eating is amylopectin. And have you ever opened the cooker after chana has been cooked and you see some like gooey substance around the chana? Yeah, what is that? What has escaped and made gooey in the water in which the amylose? Yes. So this is how your chana, which was hard after soaking and cooking, becomes nice and soft, and that makes a good chana bhatura. So what you're eating is the amylopectin, and what is all that gooey thing in the chana water is the amylose. So wasn't this a nice way to think of what happens to our chana when water is put and why we need to soak it? So what happens instead, guys? Maybe you can answer. If we don't soak chana and we want to cook it, what is the problem going to be? What is the problem going to be if you don't soak chana? It's going to be super hard. Yes, it will be raw and very hard because of all the amylose and amylopectin packing. It won't get cooked. Very good. It won't get cooked. Absolutely. So are you ready to discuss some science on the dining table when you eat chana bhatura next? Oh, yes, yes. Okay, sounds good, Anirudh. I like that. Okay, now Snehal will take you. Snehal will sprout a
Yes.
new story. Okay.
Okay. So now let's move on to something else that I'm sure all of you have eaten in the house, but I don't know how many of you like it. So how many of you like sprouts? There's going to be lots of mixed answers. Okay. Somebody said not me, not yeah. Sprouts, bhel, yes, yummy.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So everybody's eaten sprouts, even if you like it or you don't. I'm sure you've definitely eaten it. So what happens when you cook sprouts? What's the first thing that's done in the kitchen? You must have seen everybody in your house doing this one night before or even a few days before when you're going to cook sprouts. You soak them, right? You soak them in a cloth and you leave it either overnight or for a few days, right? And what happens after that? How do those sprout beans change? Have you seen them before and after? What do they look like before?
Germination.
Germination, exactly, right? You see some kind of roots appearing from your tiny, tiny beans. And what does that mean? What does it mean when a plant is basically trying to germinate? It means it is trying to grow, right? So this soaking it in a damp cloth is basically helping it grow. And why is this process important to cooking, or why is it important to your nutrition? It's important because this sprouting of your beans helps in improving the contents in terms of proteins, minerals, vitamins, all the good things that this uh, sprout is supposed to do for your health. This process of soaking it helps in increasing its nutritional value, and because of that, this is one of the most protein packed vegetarian foods that we regularly eat. So this whole process is really important for this sprout to be able to give us what our body needs, which is a lot of proteins and nutrients, right? So have all of you seen this happening? Have you seen the germination? Or have you observed it? Yes. It is very healthy. Exactly. Okay, lots of yeses. Yes. Exactly. That is why it is important to have this whole process, because it's going to help increase the nutritional value. So what is your favorite moong dish? And next time, what are you going to tell your parents? Why is this important? Do all of you now know? Will you be able to explain this? Yes, please type your questions. If you have a question, please type it into the chat window. Okay.
Okay, great, great. Yes, super healthy. So people will look at sprouts differently, right, Snehal, now?
Yes.
We look at them like a plant trying to grow packed with nutrients. Okay, shall we move on to
That's,
building a cake? Snehal,
yes.
you do this one.
Okay. All right. So now, how many of you had a birthday recently? And did you have cake?
Oh yeah.
Yes. Did all of you have cake? Okay. So, how many of you have had tried to make a cake at home? Eh, Do we have some bakers here? Yes. Okay. Lots of you. Okay.
Ala
So,
says
what
she
are the
always
basic?
does it. Okay, nice.
Oh wow, Ala,
Where do you live, Ala? We are
we
coming.
need to meet.
Yes. Athansh, type. Please type. Maybe we'll take stories in the end. Okay.
Yes. Okay. So now, what are the ingredients you use to build a cake? Of course, the ingredients can vary depending on what cake you're making, but let's just talk about some basic ingredients. So you need some butter, you need sugar, you need flour, you need eggs. There are eggless cakes that can also be made, but generally eggs are used. You need baking soda, and of course, you need some kind of flavoring depending on what you like: chocolate, vanilla. Okay, so what do all of these ingredients do? Why are they important? And what happens if you miss out on an ingredient? What if you just forget to add the butter? What's going to happen? So let's look at what all of these components do. So butter, of course, helps keep your cake moist because you don't want a dry cake, right? Butter is going to help keep it moist, and it's going to help trap some air bubbles that are formed. And why is it important for your cake batter to have air bubbles? So all our bakers are going to tell us this. Why is it important for your batter to have air bubbles?
Yes, Ala. Wonderful. To rise, to make it fluffy. Very
Yes,
good.
and soft. Exactly, right. So butter helps you do that. Now sugar also helps in keep, of course it's important because it's going to give you the sweetness of your cake. But apart from that, it also helps keep the moisture locked into your cake, which means your whatever moisture is there in your batter is not going to dry out when you cook it. So that's why sugar is also important. The next thing, of course, the most important thing is flour. Flour is the basic structure of your cake. So if you don't have flour, your cake is not really just going to be a cake. So, and this comes because flour has a molecule called gluten, which helps maintain this structure. And the amount of flour you add is going to, of course, determine how big or how small your cake is. But it's also going to determine its structure. How does it maintain its shape? If you mess up the flour ratio, it can become either too hard or it can become too crumbly, which means that even if you touch it or try to cut it, it's just going to fall apart. Which is why you need the right amount of flour in your cake. And then you have eggs. Eggs, of course, help to bind all the ingredients together. But again, eggs also help in preventing air bubbles from collapsing. And that's again important because we want our cake to rise. And all of these air bubbles, of course, they're present naturally because you're whisking all your ingredients together. So that's going to put air in, you're basically incorporating air into your batter. But we also add baking soda because that helps create more bubbles. So baking soda creates carbon dioxide bubbles, and these are what help increase the air in your dough so that it will rise. And then last is of course your flavoring component. This is just for your taste, whatever it is you like. And the ratio of each of these components is what make a cake good or bad.
So it's not a
Right?
piece
So
of cake.
definitely not.
Not a piece of cake.
Baking is not a piece of cake.
Now that we know. Yep, yep. Absolutely. So guys, are you going to egg can be substituted with condensed milk? True, true. Same
Yes,
consistency, same function.
yes,
Excellent.
exactly. So now every time you want to make a cake, and if you do want to substitute it with some other ingredient, because say you don't eat eggs, then you know what you have to find. You have to find something that can bind, that can keep the moisture, and that can prevent the air bubbles from collapsing. So now you know what each ingredient does.
Absolutely. And for our bakers like Ala, Anushka, and all, I can see lots of them. They can do science while making a cake, right? Like you guys are like now absolute scientist chefs. All right. Is that a new thing? I will just do with eating the cake.
Yes.
Cake for breakfast works. Cake is good any time of the day. I can start my day with cake. It works. All right. Okay. So let's now get into a little more science of food. Okay. Imagine we are doing a virtual camping trip. Half of us are in Pune, which is 560 meters above sea level. So it's pretty low. That's what I'm trying to say. And half of us get the exciting opportunity to go to Ladakh. Just imagine which is which, guys. You don't have to worry about it. And Ladakh is 5,700 meters above sea level. So Ladakh is at a height, okay? And you're at this camping trip and you decide you're going to boil water. So quickly, guys, at what temperature does water boil normally? What is the boiling point of water? 100 degrees. Perfect. Everyone agrees. Now, can someone think why, if you take that same camping stove to Ladakh and boil water in Ladakh, is the boiling point different? And can you tell me, is it more? Is it less? What is different? Um, it is less. Everyone notices that 92 degrees means the boiling point is less. So what do you think is the difference between Ladakh and Pune? Very good. Higher altitude, there is less pressure, air pressure. As you go higher, the air pressure decreases, right? This is why when you fly in a plane, you have to have a pressurized cabin. Otherwise, that would be the end of it. So as we are going higher, Ladakh has a lower air pressure than Pune, and so water boils at a lower temperature. Now let us look at the pressure cooker that we all use, which makes that annoying noise. I agree. I'll answer why this, how does this work? This pressure versus boiling point. Okay, so everyone has fixed a pressure cooker. I mean, you can't
Yeah.
be in an Indian household and not done pressure cooking, right? Like, and that annoying CT that only when you're in an important meeting, it will keep like doing whatever it does. Yes, okay. So when you fix a pressure cooker, you put some water and say we are cooking potatoes, okay? What's my favorite potato dish? What potato dish do we want to make, guys? Nirali says relatable. What? Dum aloo. Anushka is like going
Mm.
tough. Okay, dum aloo is tough. Okay, so we are boiling potatoes for dum aloo. We put some water such that the level is above the potato. We put the cooker on the stove. We put the lid. Correct? You're
Yeah.
imagining, right? What I'm doing, guys. All you people never walk into the kitchen. No. Okay, then you put the whistle and then wo garam hota hai, like it starts to heat. So what do you think the first thing is going to happen when the heat hits the water? Everybody can answer this. What's going to happen? Yes, yes, lots of lovely potato dishes, SPDP and all. Now these people are like taking it to another level. The water will start evaporating. Water evaporates, so it boils, it vaporizes, and what is it going to convert to? Steam. Wonderful. Now, in that cooker, the lid is heavy and the whistle is blocking any escape of steam. So where is that steam going to go? Where is the steam going to go? Up, okay, but it can't get out of the lid. There's no way to go out right now. So where is it going to go? It's going to accumulate in the cooker for the time being, right? So the steam is going to constantly accumulate in the cooker. So what's going to happen to the pressure of the steam in that cooker? Is the pressure going to go up or go down? The pressure is going to increase. And what did we just say in the earlier slide? When there is high pressure, the boiling point is going to go up, right? So with this excess pressure, it literally, you can imagine it like this: water evaporates to water vapor. The water vapor molecules literally block the water from boiling. And so that needs more and more and more and more heat to boil. And so the boiling point increases to 121 degrees. So when your potatoes are getting cooked, they are getting cooked by water at 121 degrees, more than the boiling point of water. So if you've understood this, everybody can understand this. Can answer this question. Why will it cook faster in a pressure cooker than if you just put a stove with potatoes and water? Are you getting the two scenarios? You have a stove with water and potato boiling, and one you have a pressure cooker. Steam, there is no steam in the stove. Pressure, there is no pressure in the stove. Pressure and steam, these are the two important factors, right? Which our cooker is giving you. The steam is putting this pressure, and the boiling point of water is increasing. So it is much hotter than what can happen in an open stove top. Okay, so everyone understood this. Wonderful. So then what happens? Now that annoying CT has to happen, guys. That has to happen. At some point, there is so much steam accumulating in this pressure that it is able to overcome the force of that whistle. And it lifts the whistle and some steam escapes. So everyone familiar with that? I can't even make that noise. It's so annoying. Okay, so intermittently the steam will get released, and then again that heavy whistle comes back on. So the whistle is always weighted. Have you noticed something, guys? Do it after the session. Go to your kitchen. The whistle is heavy. So why do you think the whistle is heavy? You can tell this to your mom tomorrow. She'll be super impressed. It's a good wake up call, Aditya. I agree. I agree. With dal, steam. Why is that whistle heavy? To block it, so that there's some weight and enough steam has to accumulate to overcome that force of gravity, push the whistle up and push the air out. So when we cook, usually in all Indian households, we'll say, कितना सीटी हुआ? हाँ, दाल को 3 सीटी के बाद गरम बंद करने का और चावल को 5 सीटी. और then you say, नहीं, अभी हम पुलाव बनाने वाले, तो चावल को थोड़ा ऐसा कड़क कड़क रहना है, तो कम सीटी. So what we are, okay, I'm getting totally into mother mode right now. As you can see, I'm getting into the element, okay? Snehal is also laughing. Snehal has never seen me like this, okay? So actually what we're doing is wrong. The CT depends upon the amount of heat. Now we don't use LPG, we use all kinds of induction coils and very fancy heat. So the way to measure cooking time in a pressure cooker is after the first whistle, you count time rather than the number of CTs, okay? Are you getting this? Because now we don't all work on LPG. This is the post-economic India, right? Now we have induction stoves and all kinds of cooking tops. And so we should actually, so rice typically takes about 10 minutes post the CT. Potatoes take about 8 minutes. Tomatoes will take only 3 to 4 minutes. So you should measure from the CT onwards. So can everyone share this knowledge with their parents when you're going to see a cooker next or put up a cooker? Yes, guys? Yes, okay, sounds good. So everyone knows why the CT happens. It's all that steam that's escaping, but the heat inside is cooking the potatoes. Okay. All right. Now, Snehal, let's get to the microwave.
Okay. So how many of you have used a microwave to heat something?
Everyone. Everyone.
Yes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody says me. Okay. All right. So how does a microwave work? A microwave works on something called electromagnetic radiation. So it basically means that the radiation is basically what is heating up your food. And this all comes from a part in the microwave called the magnetron. So the magnetron this sounds like a very sci-fi name, but it's not. It's an actual name of a part in your microwave. And this magnetron is what generates these microwaves. So microwaves are basically just a form of radiation. And then these are spread throughout your microwave chamber in which you've kept your food. And these go and hit the molecules in your food. And the molecules that get excited because of this microwave radiation are the water molecules in the food. Now, this doesn't mean that it has to be actual water, but all kinds of food has some water molecule present in it, even though you don't see it as water. So these molecules start getting excited, and what happens when they start getting excited is they start vibrating or moving in their place. And when they start doing that, they generate heat, right? And that's what you also do, right? When you feel cold, why does your body shiver? You shiver because you're vibrating in one place and your body is trying to generate heat to keep you warm. That's exactly what the water molecules are doing. They start vibrating, they generate heat, and that heat is what eventually heats up your food, right?
Yes, yes.
So, what is, have you observed this one thing? If you have some food that is very thick or there's a lot of it, if you have like a bowl full of rice that you're heating, sometimes if you don't heat it for enough time, only the top layer of the rice gets
Yes,
heated, but the
yes.
bottom is still cold. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? Now that you know how the food is heated, why do you think the bottom has not got heated yet?
Good question. Very good question, guys. What do you think? Now that you know how the microwave is working, why is it brilliant, Athansh? Brilliant.
The radiation doesn't reach down there, right? The
Yes.
radiation is falling only on the top layer. The top layer is water molecules are getting excited, they're vibrating, they're generating heat. But for all of this to pass all the way down, there needs to be enough heat that the top gets really hot. Then that heat is passed on to the bottom layer, and then that is how the bottom layer is heated. The radiation is not really going to reach the bottom ever. So the bottom layers of the or the inner layers of any kind of food are heated only through heat transfer, not because of the radiation.
Yes, yes. Okay. What else? One thing I noticed, guys, and I'm sure you agree, and Snehal will tell us why, that all our microwaves had that ghumta hua table. You
Yes.
notice? Have you ever wondered why?
So
Think
why do you
about
think
it.
that is there?
Now Snehal will tell us. Yeah.
Yes. So what happens? What would happen if we didn't have that table? So your food would just remain in one place. It's not going to move around,
Right.
and all the radiation is just going to fall on it. Okay, and we've already seen that even within the food, the top gets heated faster and the bottom is lower. What does that mean? That the radiation is not reaching all areas equally, right? Because what is this radiation? They're electromagnetic waves. They're microwaves, right? So which means that they have these periodic frequencies, and that means that there are parts where their radiation is high versus where it's low. And if there is not a turntable, then there are just going to be spots or areas within your chamber where there's going to be higher heat and areas where there's going to be lower heat. But to avoid your food being unevenly heated, all microwaves have a turntable, because then they're going to turn it and eventually each section of your food is going to reach a place where the heat is higher.
So this is particularly seen in papads, right, Snehal?
Yes.
If you take do this, take your turn with your parents around, put a
Yes.
papad, you see it gets all spotty. It's like a really sad papad. But when you move the papad to the turntable, it gets uniformly heated crisply. So Snehal, Shlok has a question. He privately messaged me. Why are
Okay.
there circles on the microwave door? Why is like there is some kind of film?
A
Yeah,
mesh
yeah.
kind of thing, right? So there are two things. One is, okay, so why do you think it can't be completely black, like pitch black, like a, basically if you just put a black cardboard or something, why do you think it can't be black? Why can it not just be completely shut off? Exactly, Ansh. We can't see inside, right? So basic whoever designed the microwave wanted to design something so that we could look inside, we could see if our food was okay. But it also wanted something to make sure that the electromagnetic waves or radiation doesn't leak out. So which is why the mesh is designed, or the whole microwave is designed to prevent any kind of leakage, because otherwise it's radiation, right? It can be harmful. Which is
Yes.
again why if you're heating something in the microwave, you should not go and stand with your face right to the door, even though you're really hungry.
That could be a dangerous hunger.
Yes.
Yeah. Srinivas had another wonderful question. Why are some vessels microwave
Yes.
compatible? What does that mean?
Yes. So one of the things that is mostly not microwave compatible is metals.
Right.
And one of the reasons that is because of again the radiation, right? So we saw the radiation works like waves. It basically excites molecules and they start vibrating. But the problem with metals is that the electromagnetic radiation can cause a lot of metals to spark, which means that it could cause your entire microwave unit to basically short circuit, which is not something you want. So
Yes.
there are some materials which are compatible and some which are not, because it depends on how that material reacts with electromagnetic radiation. If it's something that is compatible, it means that the radiation does not affect that material. But if it's something that's not compatible, that means that the radiation is going to react with that material and it could be harmful.
Absolutely. Then Anushka has a great question. Why does liquid in the microwave overflow? Sometimes it's happened, right, to everybody.
Yes, yes. So this is also similar actually to eventually what happens when you boil milk. Even if you put milk in the microwave for too long, it is going to overflow from the cup or whatever you put it in. Because even though the method is different, the microwave is still trying to do the same thing. Still trying to heat up your food, right? Which is what you would do when you boil milk in on a gas. So that is why milk does sometimes overflow even in a microwave.
Right, absolutely. Okay, now we come to the exciting part where did you know that there are microbes in your food? So, all right, everyone has heard of microbes. Yes, microbes can be bacteria, viruses, fungi. They're these microscopic, that's why microbe. Like they can't be seen with the eye, you need a microscope to see them, okay? For everyone who's joined us new. So, did you know that the microbes help make your food yummy? Does anyone know about that? Some of you do know. Okay, so look at all the foods on the left and tell me what are some of the foods you enjoy. I like yogurt. All says Allah. Okay, foodie right there. Okay. What else do you guys like? I like lassi, dahi, curd has microbes, Athanj, sourdough, lassi again. So all of us love these foods, right? Maybe some of them are not typically Indian foods, but we do enjoy many of these foods. Okay. Did you know that microbes help us make them tasty? All right, let's see. Is Snehal here?
Yes.
Okay, Snehal, go ahead.
So
Yes.
what do microbes do in our food? They do something called a process that's basically called fermentation. So all our foods have some kind of sugar. Now it's not the your traditional sugar in terms of what you see and you put in your teas and coffees every day. But all food is made up of some form of sugar. And what these microbes do is they break down this sugar into a mixture of different kinds of organic acids, alcohols, and carbon dioxide. Right? So this whole process is called fermentation. This causes a chemical change in the food. And this also adds the color, the texture, and the taste of our food. So your microbes are actually helping making to make your food yummy.
Oh, wow. That's exciting, Snehal. Let's see how that can happen.
Yes.
Okay, tell us more.
Yes. Okay. So one sugar that all of you have definitely heard of is glucose. Yes. Has everybody heard of glucose? Yes. Okay. Another sugar that is similar to glucose is called fructose. I'm sure some of you have heard of this as well. Okay. So these are some basic sugars that are present in all kinds of food. So we use there are different microbes that do this fermentation process. They can be bacteria, such as lactobacillus, streptococcus, or yeast. And what they do is one thing that they commonly produce, irrespective of what the sugar is and what the microbe is carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is a product of fermentation, but they also produce other things like ethanol or lactic acid. And these are all eventually in our body because that's where your food is being digested or broken down. And this process of fermentation is different for different organisms. It can happen at different temperatures, it can take different times, which is why some food, um, for example, let's look at curd. How long do you keep curd when you're trying to make curd at home? You always take a little bit of curd that is already present, right? And then
Yes.
you put it a day, a night, right? But there are other processes such as making kimchi that can take weeks. You ferment it for weeks together, right? So the time and temperature that is required for different organisms is different. So fermentation is, even though it's a common process, it can be very varied depending on the food and the microorganism.
So Anushka asked a good question here, Snehal. Why does curd turn sour if you keep it at room temperature for too long?
So why don't we look at the components? What
Hmm.
happens to curd? It's going to produce some carbon dioxide, it's going to produce ethanol, it's going to produce organic acids. And these fermented products eventually are what give it that taste. So the longer you keep it, the more these products are made, and that's what eventually leads to the sour taste.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. Okay, we can move on. Snehal, tell us something about idlis and dosas.
Yes.
Wow, what a
Okay.
session this has been.
So, how many of you have seen your parents make idlis or dosas at home from scratch?
Yes, yes.
Yes. Okay, I see lots of people saying yes. Okay, so what happens before fermentation? So it's obviously made from some kind of dal and rice, right? And the bacteria or the microbes that help in this fermentation process are actually already present on the dal and rice. So you don't add anything separately. Now, before fermentation, you see this is what the picture looks like. But what happens after fermentation? There are lots of bacteria that are present, such as lactobacillus. And what do you see is the difference after fermentation? It rises, yes. And do you see there are more bubbles in it? If you actually look at your this batter rising, you will see eventually some bubbles that come out. And where do you think these bubbles come from? What were the three products of fermentation? Which one of them causes the bubbles? Yes, Sunidhi, the CO2, right? The carbon dioxide. And this bubbling of the batter is what eventually what helps make your idlis and dosas very soft and fluffy.
Oh, मुंह में पानी आ गया. Sneha's explanation as well as the images. Yeah, I agree. I'm hungry too.
Hungry,
Okay,
definitely.
okay. What about microbes are in my sandwich? Are you
Yes,
serious?
yes, because bread is also help. There's bread gets a lot of help from microbes. Now, bread is made from a normal dough, but this dough has generally yeast added in it. And this yeast, after fermentation, again produces carbon dioxide. And this carbon dioxide, because it's in a dough, it gets trapped inside the dough. And that's what helps your dough rise.
Yes, yes, Nirali, absolutely. And that's why your bread rises, right?
Yes, and that's what eventually leads to this fluffy bread. So even if you look at all bread, even though the size of the holes may vary, your bread also has these very tiny, tiny holes in it or pores that you see. So those are the holes that have been caused because of this CO2 that's bubbling.
Absolutely. Nice. Okay, so we are at the end of our session and it's 6 p.m. sharp, and we have, I mean, this is food for thought, pun
Yes.
intended. Right? Okay. So when you cook, think like a scientist. You know, what are the ratios? What is this ingredient going to do? What can I substitute this with? That kind of thing, all right? And you can help your parents now that you know so much about what it takes to cook in the kitchen. Take care. See you next week.